"You've always been the black sheep of the family," my brother said, a smug grin playing on his face as he leaned against the doorframe of the living room. "I knew you'd do something stupid to mess this up." The words hit me like a punch in the gut. I stood frozen, staring at him, unable to fully process what was happening. My heart raced, my mouth went dry. How had we ended up here? A few weeks ago, I had been nothing more than a regular member of this family. Now, it felt like I was the villain in my own story. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to croak. His grin only widened, the cruel satisfaction in his eyes almost unbearable. "You know exactly what I'm talking about, Lucas. The missing cash. The one that went missing after you were in the study. Everyone knows you did it." It felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. How could he accuse me of this? I had been in the study all of 5 minutes, going through some old books, and when I came out, everything was fine. I never touched a thing. But here I was, standing in front of my own family, being accused of stealing. "You're lying," I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of disbelief. But deep down, a sickening feeling gnawed at my insides, a feeling I couldn't quite shake. Was I really being framed? Was this all some twisted game? "Tell that to Mom and Dad," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "They already know. And so does everyone else. You're not welcome here anymore." My world tilted on its axis. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck as the reality of the situation began to sink in. How could he say that? How could he treat me like this? But then I remembered something. Grandma had installed security cameras throughout the house after the break-in last year. Those cameras. I had to see the footage. My mind raced, my thoughts too fast to catch. I looked at my brother, struggling to keep my composure. "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I'll figure this out." He laughed, the sound bitter and harsh. "Good luck with that, Lucas. You've already lost." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, stunned. My entire life suddenly turned upside down. I had been accused of something I didn't do, by the one person I never thought would betray me, my own brother. But I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I knew I had to act fast. I called Grandma, my heart pounding in my chest as I explained the situation. "Don't worry, dear." Grandma's voice came through the phone, calm and steady, like she had been expecting something like this. "Meet me in the living room in 10 minutes. I have something that might help." I couldn't believe what she had just said. I hung up and rushed to the living room, my mind swirling with questions. What could she possibly have that could help me prove my innocence? Was it the footage? Was there something I hadn't seen yet? I couldn't wait to find out. As I walked down the hallway toward the living room, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, my brother had underestimated me. Maybe this wasn't over yet. Grandma's house was quiet as I stepped inside, the familiar scent of her lavender candles filling the air. I had always loved this house, with its creaky wooden floors and the old armchair by the window that overlooked the garden. But today, everything felt different. My heart was still racing from the confrontation with James, my brother. I couldn't believe what he had done. He had framed me for something I didn't do, and now I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered trust. Grandma was sitting in her favorite chair, the one that had seen countless family gatherings, knitting something quietly. She looked up as I entered, her calm blue eyes meeting mine. "You've got something for me, right?" I asked, trying to steady my voice. "I do," she replied softly, setting her knitting aside. I knew something like this would happen one day. She stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, and walked over to a small table in the corner of the room. I followed her, anxiety clawing at me. She lifted an old, worn-out box from the shelf and opened it, revealing a collection of old tapes. "These," she said, holding them up, "are the security footage recordings from the house. I keep them all, just in case." I could feel a flicker of hope rising inside me. If this footage showed what I thought it might, it could clear my name once and for all. Grandma handed me a tape and a small, old-fashioned player. "You know how to use this?" she asked, her voice calm. I nodded, though I was unsure. I had never used one of these old players, but I wasn't about to let that stop me. I plugged it in and pressed play. The screen flickered to life, and for a moment, all I could see was static. But then, the image cleared, and I could see the familiar hallway of the house. My heart skipped a beat as I watched the footage, my eyes scanning the screen for any sign of what had happened. There it was. The timestamp on the bottom of the screen showed the moment James had been in the study. I could see myself walking down the hall, just like I had remembered. But there was something else. James was sneaking into the study after I had left. I froze. This was it. This was the proof I needed. I rewound the tape and watched it again. James had definitely taken the money. I couldn't believe my eyes. My own brother had set me up, and now I had the evidence to prove it. I turned to Grandma, my voice shaky with the weight of what I had just discovered. He did it, Grandma. James was the one who took the money. Grandma nodded, her expression unchanged. I figured as much. He's always been sneaky, but I didn't expect him to go this far. I swallowed hard, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me. What do I do now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Now, you do what you need to do to make things right, Grandma said, her voice strong and steady. But remember, you don't have to do it alone. You've got me. A sense of relief washed over me. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt like I wasn't completely alone. I wasn't going to let James get away with this. I had the proof, and I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. Grandma handed me her phone. Call your lawyer. We're going to get this sorted out. I took the phone from her, my fingers trembling as I dialed the number. This wasn't over yet. I wasn't just going to let my brother ruin my life. It was time to take back control. I was ready to fight back. The lawyer's office smelled like fresh coffee and polished wood, the quiet hum of the city outside barely seeping through the thick windows. I sat across from the lawyer, trying to steady my hands as I laid out the security footage for him. The entire situation felt surreal, like it wasn't happening to me. I had watched the video countless times since Grandma handed it to me, each moment making it clearer that my brother had been the one who planted the idea in everyone's head that I was a thief. My brother, the person I had trusted most in the world, had set me up for something I didn't do. The lawyer looked at the footage with a furrowed brow, and after a few moments of silence, he finally spoke. This is good, Lucas. Really good. You've got your proof here, and it's solid. But we need to do more than just watch this. We need to take action. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I knew he was right, but it felt overwhelming. I had been through so much already, being framed, losing my place in my family, and now I had to take on this fight alone. I hadn't even told my parents the full truth yet. They had no idea what was really happening behind closed doors. The betrayal, the lies, it all felt like too much. But I couldn't back down now. I couldn't let James win. What's the next step? I asked, my voice steady but low. First, we need to confront your brother, the lawyer said. Legally, we can force him to admit what he's done. This footage is enough to prove he was the one who took the money. But we'll need to move quickly. We don't want him covering his tracks. My stomach churned at the thought of facing James, but the thought of him getting away with this made my blood boil. What if he refuses to take responsibility? I asked. The lawyer looked me in the eye, a slight grin forming on his face. That's when we take this to court. With the footage and the testimony, you'll have a solid case. But you need to prepare yourself. This will get ugly before it gets better. I nodded, trying to calm my racing heart. I wasn't just fighting for the truth anymore. I was fighting for my dignity, my family's trust, and my peace of mind. I'm ready, I said, the words coming out stronger than I felt. The lawyer nodded and stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I'll handle the paperwork. You need to gather your evidence and be ready. This won't take long, but we need to be precise. As I left the office, I couldn't shake the thought of what lay ahead. I had spent years building a relationship with my brother, only to watch him destroy it with lies. And now, I was about to face him, knowing that the truth would eventually come out. But I wasn't afraid anymore. The truth had power, and I wasn't going to let James bury it. I wasn't going to let him win. I just had to hold on to that power long enough to make sure he didn't get away with it. The morning was overcast, and I could feel the weight of what was about to happen pressing down on me. I had spent the last few days gathering my thoughts, making sure I was prepared for the inevitable confrontation with James. The security footage was set. The lawyer had prepared everything legally. All I had to do now was face my brother. I sat in my car outside the house, my hands gripping the steering wheel, feeling the tension in my shoulders. It had been years since I had seen James act this way. We had always been close growing up, but somewhere along the way, that bond had started to fray. I thought about all the moments we had shared, the late-night talks, the shared memories of our childhood. How had it all turned so bitter? How had he turned on me like this? I exhaled deeply and got out of the car. The house looked the same as always, Nothing about it gave away the storm brewing inside. I walked up the steps and rang the doorbell. My heart was pounding in my chest, and for a moment, I considered turning around and walking away. But no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't let him get away with what he had done. The door opened, and there he was. James, looking the same as he always had, but his eyes were cold, distant. "What do you want, Lucas?" he asked, his voice sharp, as though he was already dismissing me before I could speak. I didn't let it faze me. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice steady. "About what? The money you lost?" His sarcastic tone stung, but I kept my cool. "It's not what you think," I replied. "I have proof, James. The footage." His face faltered for just a split second, but it was enough for me to see it. He knew exactly what I was talking about. "What footage?" he asked, trying to hide the unease creeping into his voice. "The footage from the security cameras. The one that shows you taking the money." I could see the blood drain from his face. For a moment, he didn't say anything, just stood there, staring at me. "You're lying," he finally managed to spit out, but there was no conviction in his words. I took a step forward and pulled out the phone that contained the video, showing it to him. "You were the one who took it, James. You set me up." His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me, his face now a mix of panic and guilt. "No, Lucas. It's not what it looks like," he stammered, but the words sounded hollow. "What is it then? You thought you could just accuse me and get away with it," I said, my voice rising, the anger I had been holding in finally breaking through. James looked like he was searching for something to say, but there was nothing. The proof was right in front of him, and he knew it. "I'm not letting this go," I said, my voice low and determined. "You're going to face the consequences of what you've done." He took a step back, almost as if he were physically recoiling from the situation. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said quietly, his voice now shaky. It just happened." I shook my head. "That doesn't make it right. You destroyed my life, James. I trusted you." The silence between us stretched out, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry, Lucas. I never meant to hurt you." The words didn't make anything better. The damage had been done. But as I looked at him standing there, a broken man, I realized something. This wasn't just about money or betrayal. This was about me taking back control of my life. And it wasn't over yet. I still had to take the next steps, legally, emotionally, but I wasn't going to let him or anyone else push me down anymore. I had the power now, and I was going to make sure the truth came out. "We're done here," I said, turning and walking toward the door. I had no more words for him. The damage was done, but I wasn't going to let him keep me from moving forward. I had done the right thing, and it felt like the weight I had been carrying for so long was finally starting to lift. The day of the meeting with the lawyer finally arrived. I had spent the entire night going over every detail, making sure I was prepared for what was next. It felt like everything had been leading up to this moment. The confrontation, the truth, the consequences. My thoughts kept returning to the security footage, the proof that James had set me up. It was all right there, black and white, and now I was about to turn it into something real, something that would finally clear my name. I walked into the lawyer's office with a sense of purpose, the weight of what was about to happen settling into my chest. The lawyer greeted me with a firm handshake, his expression professional but understanding. "You've got your evidence, Lucas," he said as I sat down across from him. "Now we need to make sure it's used properly." His words were comforting, but the reality of what was to come still made my stomach churn. "I'm ready," I replied, my voice steady despite the nerves that threatened to rise up. "I just want to make sure James faces the consequences of what he did." The lawyer nodded. "And he will. We've got a solid case, but we need to be prepared for anything. He might try to deny it, or he might even try to settle out of court. We need to be ready for all possibilities." I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, family, and the betrayal I had suffered. This was my chance to make sure the truth came out, and I wasn't going to back down. "Let's do this," I said. The lawyer smiled slightly, then began outlining the next steps. He spoke about filing a formal complaint, requesting a meeting with the family lawyer, and making sure all the evidence was presented in a way that would leave no doubt. As he spoke, I realized how much I had to prepare. It wasn't just about walking into the courtroom with proof. It was about showing everyone, including my family, that I wasn't the villain here. I wasn't the thief. James had to face the truth of what he had done. The meeting lasted for another hour as we went over the specifics. I couldn't help but feel a bit overwhelmed by all the steps ahead of me. It wasn't just about confronting James anymore. It was about standing up for myself, for my own integrity, and for everything I had worked so hard to build. After the meeting, I felt drained, but there was also a sense of clarity. I had a plan. I had proof. And now, all I had to do was execute it. The next few days felt like a blur. I kept replaying the footage in my mind, seeing James's face when he realized I had caught him in the act. I couldn't shake the image of him trying to deny it, the guilt written all over his face. But no matter what he said, the truth was undeniable. As the days went on, the pressure mounted. I could feel my family closing in, and I knew that the moment of reckoning was approaching. The lawyer had said that James might try to settle or deny the truth, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I was ready for whatever he threw my way. When the day of the meeting with James finally arrived, I was nervous, but there was a quiet determination inside me that kept me grounded. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I wasn't going to let him destroy everything I had worked for. I took a deep breath and walked into the room where my family was already gathered. James was sitting there, his face a mask of indifference. He didn't know what was coming. "We need to talk," I said, my voice firm. The room went silent as everyone turned to look at me. The moment had arrived, and I wasn't going to let anyone walk away from this without facing the truth. The room was silent, every pair of eyes fixed on me. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. I had walked in, knowing this moment would be the turning point. There was no turning back now. The security footage was in my hands. The truth was undeniable. I wasn't the thief. James had tried to frame me, but now, the tables were about to turn. I glanced at James, whose face was a mask of feigned calm, but I could see the faint tremor in his hands as he sat there. He knew what was coming. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the silence sink in. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the tension like a blade. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of everything that had happened. "What's this about, Lucas?" James asked, his voice carrying the same fake indifference he had shown me earlier. I wasn't buying it anymore. "It's about the money you took," I said, letting the words hang in the air. I saw the slight shift in his expression. It was subtle, but enough to let me know that he was worried. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice rising a bit. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I replied, pulling out my phone and playing the footage. I didn't need to say a word. The footage did all the talking. I could see James in the study, after I had left, slipping into the room and taking the cash. I saw the way he had carefully placed it in his pocket, looking around to make sure no one saw him. The room went dead silent as the video played. I watched James' face go from a confident smirk to a pale mask of guilt. The truth was there for everyone to see. "You thought you could get away with it, didn't you?" I said, my voice low but firm. "You thought you could set me up, make me look like a thief. But the truth's out now." James opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like he was scrambling for an excuse, but there was nothing he could say that would undo the damage. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he stammered, his voice trembling. I thought if I did this, things would be easier for me. I thought you wouldn't mind." I shook my head, disbelief filling me. "You thought I wouldn't mind?" I repeated, the anger creeping into my voice. "You thought I wouldn't mind you framing me, destroying my reputation, just for your own gain? You betrayed me, James. We were family. But now, I don't even know who you are anymore." The room was still, but I could feel the shift in the air. My parents looked at James, their faces etched with shock and disappointment. They had trusted him, just like I had. But now, it was clear that he had been playing them all along. "This is over," I said, the finality in my voice undeniable. "You're not going to get away with this. Not anymore." My voice cracked slightly as I said those words, but I didn't care. I had waited too long for this moment. It was time for him to face the consequences. James stood up, his face a mixture of shame and frustration. "You don't understand," he said, his voice barely audible. "You don't know what it's like. I was trying to protect myself. I needed the money. I thought I could fix everything." "By ruining me?" I asked, my voice cold. "By destroying your own brother?" James lowered his head, unable to meet my gaze. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but it didn't make a difference now. The damage had been done. I wasn't going to let him tear apart everything I had worked for. Not anymore. "This isn't just about money, James," I said, my tone softening slightly. It's about trust. It's about family. And you broke both. The silence stretched on as everyone processed the reality of what had just happened. My parents didn't know what to say. They were stunned. And James, for the first time, looked truly sorry. But sorry wasn't enough. Not this time. I'm done here, I said, turning away from him. We're done. I walked out of the room, my heart still heavy with everything that had happened, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. The truth had come out. James had been exposed, and I had taken back control. The days following the confrontation felt like a blur. The initial shock had faded, but the weight of what had happened still hung in the air. James had been exposed, and the truth was out, but I still couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that clung to me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about trust, about family, and about how fragile those bonds truly were. I spent the next few days quietly reflecting on everything. My phone buzzed constantly, messages and calls from family members, but I wasn't ready to deal with them yet. I knew they wanted answers, but I wasn't sure how to explain everything that had happened. I wasn't even sure if they would understand. My parents hadn't spoken much since the incident. They were still processing the shock, and honestly, I couldn't blame them. The idea that their son, their own flesh and blood, could betray me like that was probably too much for them to comprehend. I didn't blame them, but I also wasn't sure how much I wanted to involve them in this. My relationship with James would never be the same again, but what about my parents? Could they still look at me the same way? Could we ever go back to being a family? Those questions gnawed at me as I sat alone in the living room, staring at the empty space where everything had unfolded. I could still hear the echoes of James's voice, the way he tried to deny everything, the way his words cracked under the weight of his guilt. It was hard to believe it was real. It felt like a nightmare I was still trying to wake up from. But as I sat there, something inside me began to change. I couldn't keep living in the past, replaying everything that had happened. I couldn't let James's betrayal dictate my future. I had to move on. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I felt like giving up, like walking away from it all. But then I remembered why I had fought so hard in the first place. Not for the money, not for revenge, but for my dignity. I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me, especially not my own brother. I wasn't sure what the next step was, but I knew I couldn't keep letting this define me. I needed to reclaim my life, my identity. A few days later, I received a call from the lawyer. "We're ready to move forward," he said. "It's time to take this to the next level." The words hit me hard. It wasn't just about clearing my name anymore. It was about taking back control, about making sure James faced the consequences of his actions. The decision was no longer about seeking justice. It was about standing up for myself, for what I had lost, and for what I wasn't going to let happen again. I agreed to meet the lawyer the next morning. I didn't know exactly what would happen, but I was ready. I had fought too long and too hard to let this go now. The next day, I walked into the lawyer's office, feeling a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. "We'll start by filing the official charges," the lawyer said as he handed me the papers. I signed them without hesitation. It wasn't just a legal battle anymore. It was my fight to reclaim everything I had lost. As I left the office, I realized that I wasn't just fighting for the truth. I was fighting for my future. James had tried to break me, but I wasn't going to let him. Not now, not ever. The days after filing the charges were a blur. The weight of what I had done settled heavily on my shoulders, but there was a sense of determination inside me that wouldn't let me back down. I had taken the first step, but the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. The lawyer had warned me that James might try to spin the story in his favor, make it look like I was the one causing all the drama. It wasn't the first time he had played the victim, but this time, I had the truth on my side, and I wasn't going to let him twist it. It was a rainy afternoon when I got the call. "We need you to come in," the lawyer said, his voice steady, but I could tell he was trying to mask the tension underneath. "It's time to prepare for the next phase. We need to make sure everything is airtight." I agreed to meet him at the office, my mind racing with what was to come. As I sat in the lawyer's office, going over the final details, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of anger and resolve. How had we ended up here? How had someone I had trusted so completely been capable of something like this? My brother, the one person I thought I could rely on, had betrayed me in the worst way possible. But now, as I sat there preparing for the next move, I knew there was no turning back. I couldn't let him get away with it. We're going to go through with it, the lawyer said, breaking my thoughts. We'll be filing the official paperwork to take him to court. He's going to have to face the consequences of his actions. I nodded, my mind already preparing for what was to come. The thought of going to court made my stomach turn, but I couldn't afford to hesitate. If I did, everything would have been for nothing. The next few days were a whirlwind. There were meetings with the lawyer, more paperwork, and the mounting pressure of knowing that the moment of truth was coming. My family still hadn't fully processed what had happened. My parents had tried to reach out to me, but I couldn't bring myself to face them yet. How could I explain everything? How could I tell them that James, their own son, had tried to ruin my life? They didn't deserve to know the ugly details, but I also knew I couldn't keep hiding from the truth. I had to stand my ground. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down at what was about to unfold. I walked into the courthouse with my head held high, the evidence in hand, ready to make sure my brother couldn't deny what he had done. As I sat in the courtroom, waiting for everything to begin, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had brought me here. The moments with James that now seemed like distant memories, the times I had trusted him when he had betrayed me. It was all so surreal, and yet, here I was, prepared to face the truth, no matter how hard it was. The lawyer handed me a folder with the final pieces of evidence. I took a deep breath and stood up as the judge entered the room. The proceedings began, and as I listened to the arguments, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm wash over me. This was it, the moment when everything would be laid out in the open. James was going to face the consequences of his actions, and I was going to make sure of it. The day in court had finally arrived. I had prepared myself for this moment for weeks, but as I sat in the courtroom, waiting for everything to unfold, the reality of what was happening hit me harder than I expected. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel the eyes of everyone on me. I wasn't just standing up for myself anymore. I was standing up for the truth, for the person I used to be before everything had changed. I glanced at James, who was sitting across the room, his face a mixture of frustration and something I couldn't quite place. Guilt? Shame? Whatever it wasn't enough to make him admit the truth. His lawyer, a sharp-dressed man with an air of confidence, was sitting beside him, whispering something into his ear. I could see James nodding, but I wasn't sure if it was out of understanding or simply to buy time. I couldn't help but wonder what kind of man my brother had become. Was this the person I had grown up with? The one I had trusted with my secrets and shared my life with? It was hard to reconcile the person I remembered with the one sitting in front of me now, trying to dodge the consequences of his actions. The judge entered the room, and the proceedings began. I took a deep breath and tried to steady my nerves. I wasn't going to let fear stop me now. This was my moment. My lawyer stood up first, presenting the evidence. The security footage, the text messages, the bank records. Everything was laid out in front of the court, and I could see the reactions of the people around me. Some looked shocked, others uncomfortable, but there was no denying the truth anymore. The proof was undeniable. The footage alone told the entire story, showing James sneaking into the study and taking the money. There was no way he could spin it. The more the lawyer spoke, the more I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders. This wasn't just about me clearing my name. It was about justice, about making sure my brother knew that he couldn't get away with something like this. After the evidence was presented, it was James's turn to speak. His lawyer tried to make the case that it was all a misunderstanding, that I was misinterpreting the footage, but it was clear to everyone in the room that they were just grasping at straws. I watched as James's face grew redder, his defense growing weaker with every word. It wasn't going to work. The truth was too powerful. Finally, it was time for me to speak. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I had prepared a statement, but as I looked at my brother, I knew I didn't need to follow any script. James, I began, my voice steady. You used to be my best friend. We shared everything. And you know what? I trusted you. I trusted you with my life. But you took that trust and you destroyed it. You set me up, you made me the villain, and now you're sitting here, trying to deny what you did. You can't do that anymore. My voice grew louder as I continued. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this because what you did was wrong, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. You don't get to destroy people and then walk away without consequences. The room was silent as I spoke, and when I finished, I sat back down, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had finally found my voice again. I had taken a stand for myself, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. The rest of the trial went by in a blur. The judge deliberated for what felt like hours, but in the end, the verdict was clear. James was found guilty. The guilt was evident in his eyes as the judge pronounced the sentence, but it wasn't enough to undo the damage he had caused. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe again. I wasn't just a victim of betrayal. I was someone who had stood up for the truth, and that was something no one could take away from me.